Well, hey, everybody. It's Sean Gibbons from the Communications Network. Welcome. Happy to have you with us. You folks coming into the room as we are. Probably seeing a slide in front of you. It says the two-word check-in. This is an idea that we borrowed from Professor Brene Brown down at the University of Houston. And as the name might suggest, that's what we're looking for. Two words as you check in. If you would, write your name, where you're coming in from, and then how you doing? Just in two words. Put that into the chat. I'll model it for you. It looks like this. Go ahead and type that in, and let's see who's with us. Go ahead and fire away, gang. Who's with us today? Let's have a look. Name, location, and how are you doing in just two words? There's Tracy. Hey, Elise. Hey, Diani. Who else is here? Coming from Puerto Rico. Zoe, Nicole, Pamela, Ayana, Hannah, Molly, Clancy. Okay, going way too fast. That's what's so great about this. We got so many folks in the room. I think we have almost 700 of us planning to be here today. So that's great. As we go along, feel free to chit chat with one another. We're in community for the next little while. And with that, I'm going to yak at you just a little bit, tell you a couple things we got cooking, and then I'm going to hand it over to Doug and the team. With that, my partner in crime, Kareem Alston, if you would, sir, who, by the way, just got married. So if you want to hop in the chat and show him a little love, he'd probably love that. And chances are you know Kareem from Slack because he's the man who makes it happen if you're a network member. But this is something that we offer to network members. We were astonished when we launched this last year. Honestly, our goal was like maybe 10% of the network will hop on here and chit chat with one another. And by the time, there's 3,000 of us, by the way. And as we closed last year, we had 2,000 people who were chit chatting, talking to one another, sharing resources, helping each other out. It's been a really just beautiful thing to witness. One of the things that makes me really optimistic as we head into this year. Always nice to see people being cool and kind to each other. Okay, with that, let's slide to the next one over here. Circles. This is actually kind of part of Slack. Many of you may be part of this, and if you're a network member, we're really hoping you're going to take advantage, especially this year as we go to expand these things. But circles, the idea is everybody needs a kitchen cabinet. None of us can go it alone. And so you'll see in the link there a little bit more about what Circles is all about, but it's gathering folks based on the job you do, maybe the issue that you're working on, or perhaps an identity you share. It's just that simple. Folks you can count on, they meet monthly, and then they talk to each other across time, whenever, wherever, asynchronously through Slack, which is just awesome. With that, let's go ahead. That's Circles for you. More on comnetwork.org. Also, ComNetwork Local. This is something I hope you all know about. We have some wonderful groups, and they're gathering all over the country. This is free and open to everybody. You don't have to be a network member. Of course, we wish you are, but if you need help and you want to get to know your neighbors, this is a great way to do so. We have a couple events coming up I want to talk to you all about. If you would, Mr. Kareem, here we go. New York gathering in just a little bit of time, February 1st. A coffee and connect. So see all these lovely faces here. Chances are at least a few of them are known to you, and maybe a few of them are among us right now. All right, let's go on over to the next one. I think we have Chicago right on. That's going to happen just about a week later. And again, just a lovely group of folks. We're big fans of all these wonderful folks and super grateful for all that they do to help the community and all the leadership that they offer for everybody. Okay, let's move ahead. I wanted to tell you about this. So y'all know this, and we'll send out an email in the not too distant future. But towards the end of last year, we shared out a survey. For the third time, we asked the field, how are you bringing the values and the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion into the work you do on the daily? What does that look like for y'all? People were kind enough to get back to us, and this is what we learned. And so you can kind of see a couple of headlines here. All of this is available, and you can hopefully see the link in just a quick second at ComNetwork DEI. And again, we'll send you out an email reminding you of this, but we'll be having a webinar coming up talking through what we learned. Not today, but in maybe a few weeks' time. So more on that soon. With that, let's move ahead one more, please. This is the other thing. I have the responsibility of telling you about all the good stuff we've got cooking for everybody. So hopefully you saw this maybe in our recent newsletter. But two things I want to flag for you that are new and important that we're really committed to for everybody. One is, if you're a network member, we're super grateful, but we also know we could do a better job of helping you connect with folks who are going to be most helpful to you. So for the first time ever, we're going to be hiring somebody whose job is going to be to focus on membership and making it even more valuable and useful to folks. Included in that will be a brand new database and a new way to find folks. So we're very excited about that. Hold us accountable by the end of this year. Hopefully your membership experience, which we think is awesome, is going to get even better. And so we're excited for that. The other thing, if you see the little light bulb down in the right-hand corner there, we're going to start. We got a little vote of confidence from the board and a little bit of money to do an experiment this year. We're going to conduct research with y'all. So what we're going to do is, the aim is, if there's 3,000 of us, surely between the 3,000 of us, we all have a little bit of idea of where we're at. And so we're going to do research quarterly, we think. Some of that stuff is going to be kind of pulse polls, giving you a little bit of intelligence about what's going on across the field in real time. And some of those may be things that we're tracking longer over time, like we did with the DEI survey. But suffice to say, you'll see that from us very, very soon, and we're excited. to bring that to you. And we'll need your help by filling out those surveys when they come your way. And I promise they'll be brief and useful. All right. I think that gets us. Oh, I'm always wrong because I always forget about this. This is the best part. We're all going to get to hang out together in Kansas City. I know Taylor Swift got there first, but we're gonna make it meaningful for everybody. We're showing up there in October, and right now what we're looking for is to everybody, if you would, well, number one, get registered. We're shocked how quickly tickets are going. Frankly, it's kind of a surprise to everybody. But Kansas City is a cool town, and we're going to have a wonderful time. But we're asking for folks right now to share proposals. So as you all know, the conference is not just a whole bunch of folks talking at you, but it's folks talking together. And a lot of that's sharing what you've learned through your own experiences, what worked, and just as importantly, sometimes what didn't work. So if you have that kind of story to tell, a case study perhaps, we're anxious to hear from you. And so you'll see that link in there for the call for proposals. Be very, very grateful if you would join us and share a little bit about your experience, what you learned along the way. All right, with that, I am almost done. I need to say thank you to Kenya, who you've seen has diligently and very bravely stuck with me while my motor mouth has been moving. She is awesome, and she is offering ASL services. So we are grateful to her. You can use that. And of course, there's the closed captioning for those who might need that down at the bottom of your screen. Avail yourself of that. At the end of our hour, we're going to go to office hours. So I'd ask you if you have a question and is specific to your organization, maybe you're looking for sort of a quick consult, hold that question, join us for office hours. In the meantime, let's get ready and get into it. Super excited and incredibly grateful to have Doug, Carrie, and Pete with us. Doug, I think you're kicking us off, so why don't I hand it over to you, sir? Thanks, everybody. See you in a little bit.
I am. Thanks, Sean. Hey, everybody. It's great to be with you. We have a lot of good material to get into, so I'm going to dive right into it right away. Let's go to the next screen. Pete and Carrie and I work at a strategic communications firm based in Washington, D.C. We work with all kinds of organizations around the country and around the world. Today, we're going to be sharing some science-based insights for engaging people, seeing new research showing why people engage and how they want to be engaged, and get your questions about audience engagement. And I'm going to start just sort of with an overview of how we're thinking about audience engagement, and then really turn it over to Pete and Carrie to get into the meat of the research that we've done, which we did because we saw that there was a need in the field that wasn't being met for sophisticated audience research. The kind of research we do for kind of big clients, big organizations all the time, can be out of reach for lots of organizations. So we went ahead and did it. We call it Spire. It's called an audience segmentation, where we go out to the general public and ask them questions through the lens of why they get involved in good causes, how they want to get involved in good causes, and things like that, so that you can connect with them and communicate in ways that motivate people and increase your reach and your response rates. So that's what we're going to get into without further ado. Let's go to the next slide. This is the approach that we take in our work, which is also sort of the ingredients for getting to meaningful audience engagement that achieves measurable impact. As you can see in the center, that's what it's all about. We're all here for communications, for social change, for impact. We start with strategic focus. Who do we need to take action, and what must they do? Those are two simple but powerful questions that help you zero in on priority audiences, no matter what you're doing. So we always start there and then get to the insights into, well, why would they do what we need them to do and why not? That's what this research starts to get into. That word aspiration speaks to some of the science we draw from. We draw from motivational psychology, cognitive psychology, and other fields of research for inspiration, right? What are they learning through rigorous scientific research that we can borrow and explore for communications? And it says that one of the most important things we can do is to connect our cause, no matter what it is, to the aspirations of the audience. What kind of people do they want to be? What kind of world or community do they want to live in? Starting there is the most powerful way you can connect, motivate, mobilize people. So that's where we start. Then getting into the stuff of communications, we start with framing any topic with an aspirational narrative. How are we presenting the issue, the topic, the organization in a way that frames it effectively for people connecting to those aspirations, those values? Then, of course, the words, images, and stories are the stuff we use to communicate. And all that really leads to, of course, action. And that's what we're going to zero in on today. Meaningful engagement. What does that look like? Let's go to the next slide. we're going to be sharing research down these lines. Looking at that methodology I just showed you, our research goes into people's aspirations. What kind of people do they aspire to be? And thus, how can you understand how to connect your cause to them in very meaningful ways? What kind of things do they like to do? And this is an important concept that a lot of organizations kind of miss. Providing experiences is kind of an idea from consumer marketing. What's the customer experience or the user experience? Whether you, no matter what kind of organization you work with, when you're engaging people through your programs, through your communications and outreach, or even with internal audiences, what kind of experience are you creating for them is a key question. And of course, what actions do you need them to take? So those are the kinds of insights we're going to share from the research, among others. And the next slide, please, gets into the basic ingredients of an audience engagement strategy. Probably not news to you, but sort of these are the boxes we're looking to fill when we're developing a strategy. Obviously, our messaging, particularly around engagement, speaks to calls to action. Images that show people taking actions is one important insight from science. People more likely to take actions they see others take. What kind of stories do we share? Similarly, that's critical for engagement. What experiences do we offer? Obviously, what do we ask people to do? And of course, how do we reach them? Those are the basic ingredients. Next slide. I'm going to tell a quick story about how we use tailoring of content and engagement to increase our reach and response rate. So this is a key concept that we're sharing through this kind of work to move us beyond one size fits all thinking into how do I tailor and target communications engagement, because that's really one way to make the most of our time and resources in communications. I'll show you a quick example about what I mean by that. The next slide. This is a campaign we did. It was commissioned by the largest funders of the LGBT movement here in the United States. They asked us to crowdsource a conversation of people across the country representing the diversity of the community about their hopes for the future of the movement so that we could provide those insights and ideas for organizations that are working to meet their needs. So we had an overarching call to action. We wanted people to share their voice, to offer their hopes, their fears, and ideas for the future. So that's what we needed everybody to do. But to engage them, we looked for different ways to communicate to get them to do that. Next slide. Our initial content was one size fits all. We had a website and our social platforms, and we were sort of engaging people in that question. So that got us started, but we started experimenting with using personas. If you haven't, not familiar with those, let's go to the next slide. These are descriptions of people who might be in your audience through the lens of their personality, their interests, their mindset. So for this particular campaign, we used a set of personas from motivational psychology. And this might be familiar to you, the caregiver. People are driven to help others. So the idea here is to set aside your own sort of lens and really look at what's motivating your audience as people and how to understand and connect to that. So the next slide shows how we started tailoring content for this campaign down those lines. So this is for caregivers, using images that address their compassion and wanting to serve other people, using nurturing language, issuing calls to action that are focused on helping others. So a caregiver is looking to do something that they feel is caring for others, kind of straightforward. Look at the next slide, please. For a different segment is the word we use for these different segments of our overall audience. Every person. These are folks whose guiding value and sort of is fairness and people being treated fairly, but they also, in terms of the experiences they like to have, they like to do things in groups with other people and they like to have fun. So here's how we tailored this for that mindset on the next slide. Using language that invokes community, images of people doing things together, calls to action about working as a group. So you can see right there, we're driving people to a similar sort of set of actions we need them to take, but very different framing using words, images, and calls to action. Next slide, please. And we were providing different ways for people to engage as well. This is an image from a workshop. We partnered with 150 community organizations across the country that brought people together for conversations down these lines. This is them filling out a little workbook we made. Next slide, please. We had opportunities at conferences where activists gathered, at festivals, community festivals, pride festivals, that sort of thing. So we had a variety of experiences that helped people engage in this. Next slide. And what we found when we went from one size fits all to the more tailored approach, our engagements per social post went from 60 engagements per post to 1,350 engagements per post. So we vastly increased our reach and resources. This is just one metric too, engagement through our social. A lot of our engagement came offline, and we were able to collect the largest data set to date on the hopes and fears and ideas of this community. We're currently working with a client using this kind of methodology on their fundraising, and just did an experiment on their end of year fundraising appeal, and the response rates went up 40% over the previous year and the previous approach they were using. So those are just examples of the power of tailoring communication in this methodology. I'm going to leave it at that and hand it over to Pete to really dig into the research that we've done to equip you to do this kind of work.
Thanks so much, Doug. Hey, everybody. Great to be with you. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. As Doug mentioned, I'm Pete Tontillo. I lead research at Hadaway, working with organizations of all kinds to figure out how to engage and motivate your audiences. And yeah, we're really excited to talk through some new kind of hot off the presses research our team has been doing over the last few months, really digging into why people give their time and their money to causes of all kinds, as well as how they want to engage. As Doug mentioned, we work with organizations of all kinds, foundations, nonprofits, universities, socially responsible businesses. But no matter what kind of organization we work with, all of them at the end of the day are trying to motivate people to take some kind of meaningful action. And as the next slide indicates, a question that comes out of that is, how do you message meaningfully to people? How do you engage people in meaningful ways? How do you identify who out there is actually going to take action on behalf of your cause? And especially, how do you speak in resonant ways to people who might have different motivations, who might have different interests? This is something we're talking with organizations about all the time. And it's really what this new body of work is designed to help address, helping social good communicators across all kinds of different issues power up your communications engagement by helping you learn why people take action on your cause, how they want to engage, and what they will actually do. So as the title card shows, on the next slide, we're calling this body of work Spire, because it helps you inspire people to take action based on how they aspire to make a difference for themselves in the world. The next slide shows the different areas the study explores, all of which organizations can use to power up your audience engagement. We're digging into people's aspirations. Why do people take action for good causes, as well as the obstacles that get in the way. We're exploring the issues that people care about, as well as the interests people have and the experiences people value when they engage with good causes, as well as the actions they take, both the actions they'd like to take and the actions they actually have taken for the causes they care most about. And then finally, very tactically, the channels that you can best reach them at. So there's a lot here, and we'll dig into some of it in the next few minutes here. The next slide shows some of our methodology that we've brought to this. The work draws on decades of research our firm has been doing, exploring how people respond to purpose-driven communications. We're drawing on insights from a range of different fields: cognitive psychology, motivational social psychology. And this is one of the core models that's really structuring the study here. This is focusing on 4 key drivers that motivate people to take action. I'll just take you through it briefly. We start at the top with the aspirational level, and Doug spoke a little bit to this earlier, thinking about, first and foremost, how does your cause support people's aspirations for their own lives? Because I hate to say it, odds are, no matter how good your cause is, most of your audience is not waking up in the morning thinking about, you. They're thinking about themselves and their own aspirations they have for their own lives, their own dreams for their families, their careers, their communities, etc. That's what's getting us up in the morning. That's what's motivating us to keep going. So what the communication science tells us is that it's much easier to motivate people to take action on behalf of your cause if you don't start by selling them on you, but you start by listening to them and framing your cause and connecting it to the authentic aspirations that they have in their own lives. Going down the model, so engaging people at the social level is also really important. When we're weighing whether to get involved with an issue or a cause, we're not just mathematically weighing the pros and cons of what to do. We're social beings. We're taking into account the social aspect of it as well. We're thinking about, for example, is this a team I really want to be a part of? So this is important for communicators when you're thinking about how do we put our own people in the picture? How do we portray the people who are involved in our issue in such a way that's going to resonate with our audience? The emotional layer is really important. We're not purely rational beings. Emotion really works hand in hand with cognition to drive a lot of our behavior, and paying attention to the emotional impact that your communications have on your audience, as well as the emotional state of your audience when they interact with you at that sort of touch point is really important as well. And then finally, we can't forget about the functional level, just the mechanics of what are we asking people to do? How are we explaining our issue to them? Making sure that our communications, our calls to action are really clear and crisp and give people a clear idea of what they can do is really important. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about how this framework is informing our audience engagement work here. So as Doug mentioned, the way that this works mechanically, Spire, is this is built on a national survey of 2,400 US adults, reflecting the full demographic diversity of the country. And the way it's working is people are reading dozens of statements. You see a couple here on the right. We have some more that are about to be populated in a sec as I talk them through. And people are, rating how important each of these ideas is to them. So just to give you a sense of kind of the framework we're using to structure this, starting at the top, at the aspirational level, we're exploring how do people aspire to make a difference when they engage with good causes and good organizations of all kinds. So we see two examples of that here. There's, a dozen other questions that we don't have room on the slide to show. Happy to share them with you offline if you're interested. We're drawing especially from many different sources, but from, for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, classic theory of motivational psychology, looking at the highest levels of motivation. So, for example, are people motivated by this idea of self-transcendence? They want to be part of something greater than themselves. For example, we have here, do they feel a sense of responsibility to help people in need? Or conversely, do people feel motivated more by self-actualization, the idea that they want to make the most of their unique gifts and talents? It's something very different than feeling a sense of responsibility to help people in need, maybe, but equally motivating to certain segments of people. At the social layer, we're really drawing from movement building methodologies, especially the extent to which people want to take actions as part of a community, or people are more motivated to take individual action. So think introverts and extroverts, both are different ways to engage and can give you different ideas of how to engage your audience. At the emotional layer, we're really exploring this through the lens of trust. This is something that we've been working with a lot of different organizations we work with lately. Trust is super important right now. It's a very low trust environment for organizations and leaders of all kinds. And it's important, and we see that a lot in sort of advocacy, philanthropy, all different kinds of issues. And what we found in the survey is that some people tend to broadly trust the organizations they work with. And I define trust in a relatively broad way, where it's, I believe that organizations generally make a difference in the world, that they actually are out there doing good. Or I believe in the goodness of people, that, when people decide to donate to an organization, they really are, they have the world's best interests at heart. They're not just doing it to make themselves look good, for example. There are a lot of people who are of that mindset, but there are also a lot of people who kind of have a more skeptical posture when they engage with organizations, even that they support. They want to see the details of how their donations get spent. They want to see the organization's track record of impact, these kinds of things. So this layer of trust is a really important thing to know when you're trying to engage people in productive ways. And then finally, the functional layer, we're really keying into this sense of whether people feel equipped to make a difference, whether they have self-efficacy is the term we use for it. So do people feel like the choices they make, the actions they take, make a difference for the world, for better or for worse? Or do they really need guidance? Do they need examples of how people are out there making change? Do they need more clear instruction of what they can do? So as Doug mentioned, how this is working is this is an audience segmentation survey, meaning it's designed to suss out the similarities and differences in people's mindsets across all of these different layers. So what's happening is, we have thousands of people taking the survey. We have dozens of questions like this. People are going through and saying, how well does this describe me, et cetera. And over time, you see, some people answer one way, other people answer another way, other people answer a third way. People start to naturally kind of cluster off into discrete mindsets that represent different ways of thinking about how you want to engage in different causes. So these kinds of surveys really reveal organic differences that exist in the population. So before we get to differences, which Carrie will talk through later, we first wanted to call attention to some of the common ground, starting on the next slide. We saw a lot of commonalities among Americans of all kinds when it comes to why and how they want to engage with causes. So first we have the aspirational layer. As I mentioned earlier, this is a really important part of audience engagement. And our Spire research found that there's a lot of shared aspirations that people have that could motivate them to take action for causes of all kinds. So what we're looking at here are the top aspirations that we found in the survey. There's more that we're not showing here, but these are the top ones that the research revealed are really influential for motivating people to take action for causes. We're going to pause for questions in a couple minutes, and I think our team is very curious to see. We have a couple lists like this. How these lists hit you. Which of these aspirations do you see yourselves really tapping into and doing a good job in your communications versus where does this list help you think more expansively or help you think in new ways about how you might engage people? So for now, just kind of ponder these lists, think about your own audience, your own issue, and think about where you might have an opportunity to tap into some new ones. On the next slide, we have interests and experiences. So Doug spoke a little bit to this earlier. I think experiences is something that when it comes to audience engagement doesn't really get the attention it deserves. There's a lot of people who think about, what can our audience do for us, but less thinking about what can we offer our audience. But the interests that people have that are driving them to seek out causes and engage with them, this is a really important part of why they're knocking on your door in the first place and a big part of the value that they're getting from engaging with you. So it's good to think, more critically about, are we helping people have fun? Are we helping people feel like part of a community? Again, these are the top interests that the Spire survey identified that are common across Americans of all stripes, of all walks of life, that are motivating them to get involved in good causes of all kinds. So again, are you, thinking about your own work, your own audience? Which of these are you doing a really good job tapping into currently in your own communications versus where might you have an opportunity to expand? Really curious to hear your thinking on this in a few minutes when we pause. The next slide shows actions. This being audience engagement research. Of course, we're exploring actions that people can take to support good causes of all kinds. The way that we're thinking about this is we're really aiming, when we think about strategic audience engagement, we're really looking for the sweet spot between what actions do you need people to take and what actions are people actually wanting to take or willing to take, and where is the middle of that Venn diagram? So we're trying to find that here. We've categorized the top ones here in terms of individual actions that people take on behalf of organizations, as well as what we call influential actions, where the people are influencing others to take some kind of productive action. Alrighty. And the next slide, we have some obstacles, some common obstacles that the research surfaced that are getting in the way of a lot of people engaging. So just kind of going through one by one here. And again, curious about how any of these are hitting you. We saw a pretty broad distrust in institutions. I spoke a little bit to this earlier when I was speaking through how trust is important to a lot of clients we work with. And distrust is something that we saw. And certainly working with organizations, I know that a lot of people tend to combat this by giving more information, more data, more research, et cetera. And that is useful for some people. We found there's a whole segment, Carrie can talk through them later, who want to take action, but who are a little hesitant. And the way to solve that hesitation is through giving them more data. They want to see the research. They want to see come to a conclusion for themselves. However, there's a lot of people who distrust institutional perspectives, who would rather get recommendations from friends and family about what to get involved in rather than so-called experts. So there are some Americans for whom that approach is going to be less effective. So that's something that could be useful for audience engagement as well. We also saw the next one, Kareem, thank you, distrust of others. this idea that most people at heart are just kind of looking out for what themselves, not what's best for everyone. Most people donating money are just trying to make themselves look good, not to make a difference. This is the idea that people have kind of soured on engagement and giving generally, which of course is going to have downstream effects for how they do or don't want to engage with your organization in particular. The third one's really interesting as well. We saw quite a bit of conflict avoidance. So this is something that we see a lot in the culture. There's a lot of fighting going on in the culture these days, and that's really infiltrated a lot of the voice and tone of a lot of organizations, where a lot of it is aimed at getting people to join the fight. And that does appeal to a certain mindset of folks who are into that kind of thing, but it also ends up turning off a lot of others who don't want to get involved in conflict and disagreement, or who on the right, especially with a lot of younger Americans, surprisingly, say that it's hard to talk about social issues or sensitive issues because they're worried about saying the wrong thing. So this is a really important thing to be aware of as well, that can have implications for kind of institutional voice and tone and engagement.
It'd be a couple of questions coming in, if I can jump in super briefly, just about methodology. Do you mind terribly? This is a good spot for that.
Sure,
So our
absolutely.
friend Laura asks, I'd love to hear more about the sampling strategy for this survey, what it's based on. Is this an opt-in panel or is this a probability sample? And are you doing any weighting of results? She's trying to science.
Good question. Thanks, Laura. And yeah, Laura and I are actually, I think, having a call in the next couple of days to talk through. So thanks for your question, Laura. Yes, this is an opt-in panel, and we are waiting to bring things in average with the kind of representation of demographics of American population overall.
Okay, I think you might have just gotten to Alri's question, which was about demographics. Are you taking that into account, or do you have some sense of that? And then another question from our friend Sarah, and then I promise we'll jump back into it. To what extent does all this information take into account accidental misrepresentation of behavior? So she points out, we know people will think they've not signed up for an email list when we know that they have, or they'll claim that they've read every email when they rarely open them, for example. So self-reporting is great on motivation, but how do we start to think about people's stated reasoning versus what they actually do? No one ever does this, by the way, right? Says they're going to do something and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure Carrie and Doug have thoughts as well, because this is something we work with in a lot of organizations that we work with. But yes, this is, kind of by design. This is about motivation. This is about how people see themselves, what they want for themselves. So this is really leaning more into the motivation more than actual behavior. As Carrie talks through, the way that we've structured a lot of questions in the survey, we try to get as much as we can, as is possible in a quantitative instrument like this, to what actions people have actually taken on behalf of good causes of all kinds. But yes, there's always going to be some sort of logical leap between what people aspire to do and what they're actually out there doing. But for us as communicators, especially given the methodology that our firm uses, we really lean into people's aspirations. We want to know how they see themselves so we can help them be their best selves in order to motivate them.
All right, gang, let's jump back into it. Sorry to slow you down, Pete.
No, no worries. This is great. So I just have a couple other slides here to walk through the kind of things that we're finding, just to round this one out. So another obstacle that we found is this idea of doubt. I talked about the importance of self-efficacy earlier. Doubt is a big barrier to this, that most people see themselves as ordinary people, and they're not sure that engaging with organizations and being a part of something bigger is really something that ordinary people do. There's a divide on this. A lot of people doubt that they can give enough money to make a real difference, or that they don't have enough time to engage enough to make a meaningful difference. And that's something that creates this kind of permission structure to have them kind of disengage entirely. So on the next slide, we get to a couple other components of the study. So we also have analysis of people's interest in, engagement with these 24 issues that you see on the screen here. So that's kind of an additional layer of analysis that we can bring to this as well. That if you see your issue on the screen here, we'll be able to show you who cares about your cause, what their unique motivations are, what actions they take on behalf of your cause, and ideas for how to best engage them. So that's the way that a lot of organizations are using this data. We have a super quick and dirty example, very high level on the next slide, just taking a common issue that we work on, healthcare and public health, for example, and giving you a sense of kind of what's here. So what we're looking at on the left here are among the segment of people who care the most about healthcare and public health, i.e. those who say that healthcare and public health causes are in their top 3 causes they care about. These are their top motivations on the left, their top 4 motivations among those Americans. They want to be the best person they can be. They want to help people in need. They want to stand up for what they believe in. They want to be someone that others can look up to. It's kind of it's a wide-ranging and maybe somewhat provocative, take on how you might be able to, as a public health organization, appeal to people? How can you help them stand up for what they believe in, for example? This can help you think that through. And on the right, we have top barriers. This idea that everyday people are out there doing more good than powerful leaders in big organizations. For example, if you're a big organization, how might you be able to combat this sense that how might you be able to combat this barrier by saying, for example, how you're powered by the individual actions of everyday people, for example. So you can use these insights to think about how to tap into these motivations, how to overcome some of these barriers. On the next slide is some more data. You can also look at top actions. These are the top actions that people who care about healthcare and public health have taken in support of healthcare and public health causes, the percentages for each, as well as the top channels that audience is using to learn about that issue, to, again, help in a more tactical way with audience targeting efforts. So this is just a little taste of the data that's available here. So now I think it's a good time to pause for questions. I know we've just thrown a lot at you, so we'll pause for a few moments here on the next slide. We just have a question slide, and then I'll pass it over to Carrie for the last part of our talk to take us through. So I was talking through the similarities, and Carrie's going to take us through the salient differences, really the segments and mindsets that the survey identified, showing different ways that people want to get involved with causes.
A couple questions here. Matt asks, have you done any segmentation of these results by age? I do a lot of work with young people and Gen Z, so I'm wondering how much I can apply from this research of US adults to 18 plus folks.
That's a great question, Matt. Yes. So there are a couple things I would say. One is that the way the segments are designed is to explicitly be according to those motivational questions that I was talking through earlier, not demographics. So what we find when we do it that way is that all of the segments that you're about to see cut across all demographics, age included. So each segment is very internally diverse. It contains all different kinds of people, but who share similar beliefs. So that's kind of one thing. But then the other thing is, of course, certain segments skew one way or another. All of them are diverse, but all of them have a skew as well. We have two of the segments who are what we would call our youngest segments, our strivers and butterflies. Carrie will talk through them in a second. Those segments are each comprise about 40 of them are under age, or 40% of them are under age 30. So they're quite young. They're not all young people, but that's where a lot of young people sit in the study.
Okay, a couple more questions here. Alri asks, was X or Twitter not a channel on the list? In other words, do you know something we don't?
It was on the list. It just was not cracking the top ones, interestingly, for this particular list of healthcare and public health.
Interesting. Okay, Molly asks, sorry if this was shared already, but how can we access this survey data? Maybe this is something y'all could toss into the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So Carrie will talk through that in a little bit. Basically, we're working with organizations in a bespoke way to help you apply the data to your own organization. So we'll have a call and talk with you about your particular needs, and we can work with the data on a more individualized basis.
Okay, we got one more, and then we'll jump into it with Carrie. Natalie asks, are you able to share the data related to other issues rather than that list that you laid out? That was quite a bit, but
yeah, absolutely.
I imagine there's always things. Were there other issues that you tested on for potentially?
Yeah, there are always more that we can ask about. The way that we're seeing this is we see this as a version 1.0 of this methodology. And the idea is that we're going to refield this survey on an annual or potentially biannual basis to continually get updates for how, take the temperature of how people are feeling nowadays, map important changes that are happening in the population, but also be able to add, for example, more issues. We've already built out a half dozen more issues that we want to ask about in the next round of the survey, which is going to be fielded in late spring. So if you would like to add yours to the list, get in touch with us and we can make that happen.
Wonderful. All right, mindful of time, why don't we jump back into it? Thanks everybody for the good questions. And thank you, Pete.
Yeah, now we're getting into the brass tacks of this. One thing when Pete and I started concepting this survey was it had to not just be theoretically interesting, but practically applicable. What can you do with this information for your cause or your organization? And so we really look at those motivations to create, unified clusters of people that you can target, you can reach, and you can focus with the work that you're doing in your communications outreach. And so there are 6 segments in Spire. Again, this is all American adults. We surveyed 2,400 people. When we looked through all of those motivations and barriers and observations and actions, people cluster. We are all unique and special, and we also all have our social group that fits our profile. And so we're going to go through an overview of each of them and then kind of a deep dive to show how two segments who care about the same issue are much more motivated to engage in very different ways to get a sense of how you can really work with this material. So if you can go to the next slide. So our 6 segments, and I'll give you kind of the nickel summary of each of them. The first is what we call our altruists. This is about our biggest segment. These are people who are defined by their optimism, their belief that they can sort of roll up their sleeves and take action and good things will happen. They are very community-minded. They want to work with other people. They're eager to get involved and do something. They don't want to lead. They want to sort of be part of something with people they care about, but they don't want to take charge of things. They're kind of your foot soldiers if you have a cause that you care about. Our next group, also highly motivated to take action. They care deeply about a lot of things. They are also very concerned about doing it wrong. That's their big barrier, is this doubt. And so they overcome that barrier by being extremely detail-oriented. They want to do their own research. They want to look into your financials. They want to talk to people who've been involved. They're going to do their homework before they take action with a given cause or a given organization. The next segment is our butterflies, as you can tell by the name. These are the people who they're in it for fun. That's one of their top motivators. They care about things, but if they're going to get involved, it better be fun. One sort of data point on these folks, they really love swag. We asked a question about that. Are they motivated when an organization gives them a gift or a piece of something? And they really like that. And they are mostly in it. They make decisions quickly. They don't want all the details. They just want to hear about it, decide if they're going to do it, and kind of get on with it. Our next group is our strivers, which again, somebody asked about younger audiences. About half of all Gen Z and millennials are either in the butterflies or the strivers. So this is 2 big segments where a lot of those younger audiences are clustering. And our strivers are really in it for that personal recognition. They want to be seen as a good person. They want to take a lead. Interestingly, an interesting data point with these folks is they are much more likely to write original social media content than they are to share content from an organization. So give them tools, give them templates, give them ideas, those kind of things. They're going to run with those versus just reposting your post, that kind of thing. Our next audience is the wallflowers. Again, very deeply care about others and the world around them, but they're not really easy to get going. They're sort of standing on the sidelines, watching what's going on. They will take action when they have the information they need. But unlike the inspectors who are doing all of their own research and really digging into things, the wallflowers are talking to friends, they're talking to family, they're getting that more personal community recommendation about something they might do. So they're really relying on their community and those trusted advisors, and people that they know to get them to actually act and do something. And then our last segment, which is such a fascinating one, critics. We all know people like this. They're outspoken, they're pessimistic, they're deeply skeptical. They are less likely to take action across the board, but they want their voice to be heard on the things they care the most about. So if you can motivate this segment, if they care about your issue, these are the folks who are going to write your op-ed. They're going to write the letter to the editor. They're going to go testify at the school board meeting. So, approached in the right way with the right channel, this could be a really powerful audience for you. And we did look at this. Interestingly, our younger audiences are twice as likely to be in the critic bucket than the altruist segment. So, we Gen Z, we've got about half of them are either a butterfly or a striver, another 10% are critics, and then another 5% are altruists. So you can see how this starts to help you think about how you're matching and mixing all of the things you know about your audience with message, channel, experience, and opportunity. So we're going to go through some 4 for instances with two of these audiences to show how this plays out when you are, and we did this through the lens of healthcare. So one thing that we did, we looked at all of our issues and we asked everyone to say, what are your top three causes? For both of these segments, healthcare is a top cause. So these are people deeply engaged in health and public health issues. And again, these altruists are motivated by this vision for a better world, the desire to positively impact people around them, and they believe that their work matters. They have great confidence in their ability to take action, and that action will result in something positive happening. As opposed to that, the strivers are again defined by their desire to lead, their sort of can-do spirit, and their interest in being recognized. So these are folks that they want to get kind of a personal payoff, whether that is recognition, a leadership role, or, as I mentioned, swag. So if you were, and let me give you a couple examples of how we know this about them. Of the many items that we had in our survey, if you go to the next one, these are some really key differentiators between these two audiences. So we asked people, I get excited about the good fortune of others as I do about my own. 3/4 of our altruists agree with that statement. Only 1/4 of the strivers do. When we asked, I prefer, again, back to my swag question, I prefer to support organizations that give me gifts or benefits. 1/3 of the strivers prefer to support those kind of organizations versus under 10% of the altruists. Again, that idea of fun, 40% of strivers, if they're going to get involved with you, they better be having some fun while they do it. And then optimism versus pessimism, again, over 70% of our altruists say, despite all the challenges in the world, they're optimistic about the future. So you can see how you start to care about the same issue. Demographically, as I'll show in a minute, very similar, lots of similarities, but mentally, psychologically, motivationally, very, very different people. I'll show you how that plays out a little bit. If you can go to the next slide. The demographics, again, the point of this slide is not to parse all the little numbers, but that with each of these audiences, you are going to reach the full spectrum of people across all age groups. You're going to reach everybody from 18 to 80, but you're going to be targeting them in a different way. And if you go to the next slide, this was a fascinating occurrence. We tend to assume that political affiliation tracks with intent. And these, if we were to only look at the political lens, they would look almost exactly the same. So you can see how this kind of an approach opens up your eyes to how can I really understand people, look at them through a different aperture, find some things about them and maybe undercut some of the assumptions I had, and really give you a fresh platform for thinking about what could I be doing to really reach them well and reach them thoughtfully, creatively, and over the long term. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So again, our altruists, they're focused on other people. They're focused on community. They want to bring people together. They have a lot of trust in organizations. They believe that 501c3s and other nonprofits are the place to take action, and they want to be part of that. Interestingly, they like innovative approaches, which you think maybe doesn't fit with that trust in the longer term organizations, but that's where the trust comes in. We trust that if you're trying something new, there's probably a reason for it. And so they want to see how that plays out. And again, just very, very functionally, if you have content, they're very likely to share it versus our strivers who really want to create their own thing. And then our strivers, again, self-oriented, looking for some respect, some recognition. They want to have fun. They want to get benefits. They're a little bit skeptical, which is why they prefer the tried and true. They want to see that there's some data behind why we're doing this, not that you're just, sort of trying something new for the heck of it. So how this might play out if you were, and we created sort of a fictional healthcare charity focused on, to go back. These are what they've actually done. And I want to dig into this a bit because there were quite a bit of questions about this. So our sort of cascade of the survey was, we asked people, what causes do you care about? And then we said, what are your top 3? And then we said, of those top 3, what have you done in the last, I think it was 18 months, Pete?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so again, self-report. So you do have to understand that we didn't verify that they actually did these things, but mentally, this is what they think they did. And again, they're quite different, right? 40% of our altruists donated money. Despite their leadership wanting to be in charge kind of role, only 10% of the strivers did. Again, factoring it into their voting decisions, the altruists were much likely to do that. Volunteering, the altruists were much more likely to do it. So you see that the takeaway here is both there's a diversity of ways that all of them want to take action, and the strivers are more diverse. Giving them a bigger kind of menu of options of things to do, you're more likely to offer them something that they want because they're looking for that variety. There isn't the overwhelming percentage of any of them doing the things the way they're altruists, where they're really clustering around donating money, sharing information, factoring into their voting decisions. There's some really key buckets there that you could get a lot of action for, where the strivers really want to see some other things from you. And we did ask about this. There's interesting, cause-related purchasing. They're about the same. About 20% of them say that they have purchased an item to support a cause, which is very different from what you might see in some of the more theoretical research, where people are asked, would you do that? Would you be likely? And you hear numbers like 60, 70% of people saying, I would do that. We've got some data that says about 20% say they have actually done that. I do want to, I see a lot of questions and things popping up in the chat. I don't know, Sean, if you want to pause here and address some of the interest.
Yeah, Carrie, you cool with that? I know we're mindful of
totally
time, gang, so I'm going to talk fast as I always do. We'll try to get to as many of these. What we don't get to, gang, we are doing office hours. If you were here at the top, you heard this. Carrie, Doug, and Pete have been kind enough to make about a half hour available to answer questions, kind of give individual consults. So we'll gather up there. We'll put the link to that in the chat in just a quick minute. But for now, Emily asks, as a funder, my org's audience includes lots of other organizations, so not all individuals. Would love to hear how to apply these individual motivations to communications geared towards groups rather than individuals. So how do you talk, if you're working in public health, you're the CDC, how do you talk to the AMA is maybe a way to think about it.
Yeah, Doug, I know you have a lot of thoughts on that. Do you want to address that one?
Yeah, the simple answer is groups are made of individuals. So step out of the one size fits all. If you look at the medical profession, for example, you're going to see these personality types showing up, to use Sean's example. So that's one of the interesting things when you look at an audience through what this is more of a personality or mindset lens, you'll see people show up in all kinds of contexts. So it can be useful. What we recommend is you sort of experiment, and see what you can survey your list if you have a list, or just experiment with these things in your communications and see what kind of response you get. And you might find that you have a couple of these clustering in your particular group. Another thing is kind of assume you're talking to people from different mindsets when you're speaking to a crowd, for example. You can play with it in lots of ways.
Let's jump to another question if we can. John is asking, do you have the full age breakdown on these segments? So I know this is obviously a representative sample, but have you been able to kind of extrapolate that out?
Yeah, we do. And again, we didn't start there, but of course we have all that on the back end. And again, the main takeaway is there are certainly differences among the clusters. Every cluster includes, or every segment includes people across every age group. But as I mentioned, we did for a client that we're working with on this, saw that, millennials and Gen Z, about half of them are in the butterflies or the strivers, another 10% in the critics, and another 5% in the altruists. Obviously, the rest divide among the others. So you do see that different, if you're looking at it through a specific generational lens, you may find more of them in one segment or another.
Gotcha. And sort of a related question from our friend Sarah. She asks, are people thought to stay in one category throughout their lives, or do you think people move from one persona to another as they age and experience life?
Such a great question. And that's the point Pete was making. We're going to refield this and see. It's not a longitudinal study. In other words, we're not surveying the exact same 2,400 people, but we'll get a sense of, do we see generations kind of moving
Do
among these as we ask questions over time?
you guys have a hunch? Hypothesis?
There is research suggesting that, yes, your aspirations and motivations can shift, particularly at big life stages of change. Like if you leave home to go to college, you graduate from college to get a job, you meet someone to get married, like things shift. So yes, life stage can make a difference for sure.
Yep. And not to mention a lot of the way that these segments were constructed are built on kind of circumstantial life factors. Like I feel like I have enough free time to contribute. I feel like I have enough disposable income to contribute. Those things, of course, change for many people throughout the course of their life as well. So when you see, other firms who mainly are doing consumer segmentations, but who have done them kind of longitudinally over decades, you see a lot of shift in terms of some people leaving one segment and joining another, and the segments themselves kind of morphing and shifting throughout time as well.
And so maybe this
Hey,
is a
Sean,
little bit, yeah.
Sean, I had a thought I wanted to build on part of the conversation, a good question before between aspiration and actual action, right? These are large numbers of people saying, yeah, right, I would do that. But our job in communications and often our success is not to get all of these people. So if you look at one of these segments, there's tens of millions of people that are out there. We did a custom segmentation for an organization that is a ComNet member. We found a segment focused on their issue that was 38 million people. So we looked at our plan, looked at our communications, and we were focused on fundraising and volunteer. And if we got 0.1% of that audience, we would have doubled their annual budget, right? So that's one way to think about this. This is showing you opportunity in the world, and look at what piece of this pie you need and could conceivably get. You don't need 40% of 30 million people, right?
Well, I don't know if y'all are reading the chat or seeing some of the questions, but there is clearly quite a bit of enthusiasm for the research you've all done. I think we're all comms nerds, so we're super grateful for this. Let me get to one more. Hannah is asking, is there a gender breakdown of this data? Is that another way that you might have sliced and diced?
Yep. Yeah, we do. Again, we have all the demographics. We haven't run it all against every segment, but women, there definitely are, I would not say enormous swings in difference of the gender breakdown of each of them.
I don't think there's any segment that's more than 60% man.
Did that surprise you at all, or did that track with what maybe you were expecting to see?
That tracks with a lot of work we do. You typically see some differentiation among gender, but it's too much of a blunt instrument generally to see that much differentiation on a lot of different issues. So it wasn't particularly surprising to me, at least.
So a question's a leading question, Doug. I'll own it. But how might the world of AI that's arriving and is in front of us, how might this apply there? What would that look like for our field?
We've been exploring and had a lot of really good output from generative AI to help brainstorm messages, images, stories, and experiences. The next section, which we've run out of time for, shows how we tailored those. And ChatGPT was a tool I used for that, and it was super helpful. Of course, with all the caveats around that, the human is responsible for what goes out in the world, and you got to look at whether it's on the mark in any number of ways. But it can be very helpful because one of the benefits is that it helps you get out of, our own limited, necessarily limited perspectives, right? It opens up the broader sort of world of information to you. That's how I see a lot of the value. So it could be particularly useful. I wanted to ask real quick, since people were jumping off, if we could jump to the slide where we provide our contact information for folks who are looking to get in touch. There you go. For those who are looking for further information, feel free to use that QR code or email us there.
Great. And gang, we will have all this stuff up on YouTube. I know a number of y'all have asked this. Come on now. We always post it. Give us, Kareem's faster than I am. I say 24 hours, I'll have it up in 2, but let's say 24 hours from now, you'll be able to watch it. Now, that said, gang, don't leave. We're going to all bounce over to office hours. So those who can, please do join us. There's more to talk about. We'll see you. The link will be in the chat in just a quick minute. Doug, Carrie, and Pete in the run of show. You should see a link to get you there, or just grab it right out of the chat. And I'll see y'all a little bit later. Thank you for the time. We'll be back in February to talk a little bit about what we learned when we were talking to y'all and surveying the practices across the field related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. How does that show up for everybody in your work? Thanks, everybody. Be well. And thank you, Kenya. Much appreciated. Really appreciate you.